because it's surrounded on three sides by water, which means that the British Navy, the big, powerful Navy, can cover him from three different directions. If he needs supplies, they can get it in from almost anywhere. He needs ammunition, if he needs reinforcements, if he needs a place to retreat to, if he just defeated in battle. And then, of course, on the landward side, you only have one little narrow neck that you've got to try to defend if the Americans decide to attack you. So it seems like a good place to build a base up, and of course you rely on the Navy in order to help you out. Now, of course, at this point, Washington is kind of in a staring match in New York with General Howe. But with Cornwallis putting himself essentially in a little bag, Washington sees an opportunity to destroy Cornwallis' army. But all the little gears are going to have to click together just right in order for this to take place. One of the problems is, how do I get away from Howe's army in New York without him knowing where I'm going? Because if he knows that I'm going to march my army down to Virginia, he's going to try to stop me, and that's going to slow things down, and it's going to throw the whole timetable off. And he's able to do this by moving his army first to New Jersey and then acting like he's going to attack New York from the south. So Howe, he moves his forces to sort of receive the attack, and the next thing you know, where's Washington's army? It's gone. And by that point, it's too late to do anything about it. So he's able to march his forces down now south to Virginia. You're also going to see that the French forces that had landed in Rhode Island the year before are able to march overland, and they're going to meet Washington and Morgan's army, which is now moving north from the Carolinas to surround Yorktown from the landward side. But Cornwallis is still in a good situation, right? Because he's backed by the Navy on three sides. He's resupplied by sea. Even though the Americans and the French are sort of building these siege lines around Yorktown, okay, and they're beginning to sort of bombard the area, naval artillery and the force of the British Navy keep these guys off. And once I get enough troops, I'll knock these guys backwards, okay? Then we get one of the weird moments that happens almost never in world history. And that is, you've got the British Navy losing a naval battle to the French. This kind of, it seemingly almost never happens, okay? In many cases, especially for those of you who are fans of military history, you read about this. In some cases, in later wars, where the British Navy would take on the French Navy, you'd have like one British ship, and you have like two bigger French ships, and the French would still lose, okay? The British, they're just really, really good at the whole naval thing, all right? But the British naval flotilla that's operating here in the Chesapeake, a French naval squadron, is going to be operating right off of this area under the command of a French admiral named de Grasse. And his plan wasn't even to be there necessarily. It was just, I'm heading down to the Caribbean to fight the British down in the Caribbean, because that's way more important to France, its colonies in the Caribbean, than this. But if the British are there, I'll fight them too. Well, the British come out, and they fight these guys, and lo and behold, the French Navy wins. And for those of you who are standing up, you may want to sit down, okay? What that means now is, on the seaward side, Cornwallis' army is no longer surrounded by a friendly British Navy. It is now surrounded by a very angry French Navy, which is now using its naval artillery to shell his positions. So things are looking pretty bad, because the American and the French lines are creeping closer and closer. More artillery now is landing in the town of Yorktown, where his base is. Ironically, you want to talk about sort of people burning with patriotism. One of the patriots who was helping Washington's army was a man who lived in Yorktown. And he had escaped from British occupation. He had gotten to the American lines, and he'd gotten a chance to talk to General Washington. And he said, listen, I'll help your artillery people know which buildings to target in town, because I know where all the British are staying. Oh, yes, we'd be glad to have your help for this. And he was like, okay, these guys are staying here, these guys are staying here. And, they got the little telescope out there looking, and they're trying to get this all sort of sorted out. And he says, okay, and that one, that house there, that's my house. And they're, okay, we'll try not to hit your house, because you're helping us. No, blow it up. The Brits, they're using that as a headquarters. And so, I'll build another house after the end of the war. Are you sure about that? Yes, we got to win the war, okay? And in fact, if you read one of the accounts, he chastises the artillery teams. They're, well, your shots are landing. Here, give me that thing. And so the dude called in artillery strikes on his own house to help win the war. There you go, you're nailing it. Now let them have it. So anyway. So beset on the landward side by the French and the American armies that are shelling the city from that way, and then, of course, on the seaward side with the French Navy, who've got it blockaded. Cornwallis is completely surrounded. He's completely cut off from England. It doesn't look like he's going to get any more food or supplies or reinforcements. And Cornwallis is now forced to surrender his army here at Yorktown. And this is essentially going to end the fighting of the war. Cornwallis, if you read his sort of thoughts on this, that he just couldn't believe that he was beaten by this rabble of ignorant sort of peasants. And he refused to come out and surrender his sword to Washington. He tried to get one of his aides to do it, and they said, "You're not Cornwallis. Cornwallis has to come out and do it." The whole ceremony, you hand the sword over, it's sort of goofy, but this was how you did things to symbolize that the other guy has won. And so Washington said, "No, I'll wait here. Oh, Cornwallis is sick. Well, we'll wait till he gets better." So eventually Cornwallis is forced to come out and surrender. Well, all this is going to lead to a political sort of meeting. And that is going to be the powers that be are going to get together in Paris to hash out a peace treaty. All right. Lord North's government, the Tories are going to lose a great deal of power in Parliament. They nearly lose complete control to the upstart Whigs. And so these Whigs, they gain a great deal of power in Parliament, and they're the ones that are very friendly to the American position. They say, "Listen, let the Americans have their own independence. We can still trade with them after they're done. No, we can't tax them, but who cares? There are other ways to make money." England also militarily and politically, they're having trouble defending the rest of their empire. India and some of the other parts of their empire had risen in rebellion right around the same time as the Americans had. And so if they want to hold on to other parts of their empire, they need to just let the Americans kind of go. In fact, the British do a really, really good job of defending their empire in the American Revolution. Just the American part is the only part that gets away. So if you look at the overall sort of percentage, they're back to like 90%. That's not too bad, all right? France and Spain are some of the ones that are trying to carve away parts of the empire. And so throughout the fighting, you're going to see ever increasingly British troops that could have come to America to engage the Americans are going to be sent elsewhere. So at the Treaty of Paris, the British diplomats, they agree, sort of begrudgingly. I like to think that they had to admit this with gritted teeth, although I don't know, they did that. America is independent. So they have to say it out loud, right? That the United States is an independent nation, that Britain would recognize that it is a country all by itself, and that we can't have it anymore. Okay? Now, what exactly does that mean? What parts of the British Empire that used to be British Empire but now is going to be America is going to be the United States of America? Okay? So the agreement gives the United States the land, basically from Maine, what is now Maine, all the way down to Georgia, okay? Because Florida, not part of this deal yet, all right? And it's going to go from the eastern coast of the United States all the way westward to the Mississippi River, okay? Any and all British forts that are on that land, because this was all part of the British Empire, okay? And so they had forts guarding it. Any British forts that are on that land is going to be supposed to be transitioned over to the United States. It's supposed to be, okay? The U.S., on the other hand, they have some parts of this deal that they've got to uphold as well. And that is they have to provide compensation for the losses to the citizens that remain loyal to the British Crown. And this is actually fairly consistent with international law. If citizens of one country do damage to the citizens of the other country, the government of that country has to pay off those people. They can then turn around and say, "Hey, you really shouldn't have burnt that guy's house down. You need to pay for it." But generally speaking, the American government is going to look at this as, "Hey, this is part of the cost of the war. We had to get rid of these loyalists. We had to burn their building down or throw rocks through the windows or whatever." Okay, and so these people had to get compensated. The United States would assume the responsibility of doing that. But major factor here is the United States is independent. It wins this war and is going to get to set up its own country, which we'll talk about